Quando Swamiji, when he wanted to expand the work beyond America, he knew that Italy was the right place, perché è un posto delle corde. È vero. So, I would like to talk now. We've been of the art of living. This is a phrase that Master first used in the 1920s. Since then, it has been used by many others, but Master was the first one because he knew in bringing the ancient art of yoga and meditation to the West, he knew that he had to make it more than just something you did in an enclosed room or in a temple, but he knew that Westerners were more outwardly oriented. And so he knew he had to show them how to make their life a piece of art, a work of art. And this, I think, is important for all of us because not all of us will paint, not all of us will dance, not all of us will write. For me, it is a great joy when Jyotish goes into his art studio and paints, because I can feel in the rest of the house this wonderful energy, this wonderful intuitive flow. And someone recently asked me, how does it feel when Jyotish is? Do you like it when he's painting? Because he's very isolated. I said, oh yes, because the house is so quiet then. But I didn't mean it because he's a quiet person. It's not like he talks. But what I meant, the energy becomes very, very interiorized, and it helps me. But when we've been talking about art, and you all, many of you have been here for a few weeks talking about it, we need art. Why is art a creative, how is art a creative expression, I should say? How? How do people create music and dance and painting? It has to stem from to see beauty around you, to want to share it, but then it has to be formed by training and discipline. No great artist just gets up there and starts slapping paint on a canvas. No dancer. I read the life years ago of Margot Fonteyn, the great ballerina, prima ballerina. And from a young age they start learning how to discipline their body, learning how to move. And of course the great Renaissance artists of Italy, from children they started learning how to paint and sculpt. And so that discipline, it forms and it matures as you mature. And this, in my life, I've watched Jyotish mature as an artist. It's beautiful. He's able to capture form and color and expression in ways he couldn't when he started, because he disciplined himself and he trained himself. And so for all of us, we come now to the art of living. And Master has a beautiful essay he wrote about the art of living. He wrote it in 1933. But in it, he's just talking about the training we need in many aspects of our life to be able to make it an art. It doesn't happen automatically. Was blessed to have a very beautiful mother, very good woman, even as a child, if I would come home from school, maybe crying, maybe someone had teased me or not treated me well, she, instead of getting all angry and saying, oh, I'm going to call that girl's mother, she would sit down and say, let's try to understand that person. She always trained me to see past the outward activity into the soul of the person. And it's carried with me through my life. But even from that, the training that a person has is so important. And to be able to see the beauty in life, to be able to see God's presence in life, this comes back to the training. To be able to be an artist in your life, you have to be able to feel God's presence within. And when you feel it within, you can see it without. And there's that beautiful song that I'm sure the choir does, "Oh Master." And Swami wrote it from another person had done the beginning version, and then Swami developed it. And the words are, "Help me to find in every hour, in every thought, in every flower, a joy that spans eternity, the truth that makes us ever free." And so to be able to do that, how? It doesn't come naturally. My mother, who I was mentioning, she said to me towards the end of her life, "I always thought when I got old I would become wise, but it just didn't happen." And she was mistaken in that because she was wise. But what she was, there's a teaching in that. We won't automatically become the person we want to be, the person we know we are inside, without training and discipline. And that's what forms us. And so Master gave us in this article, it's very interesting about the art of living. He talks about, it's very practical. It's not philosophical at all. Right diet, right fasting, right exercise, running every day, or walking or brisk walking or running every day. Very practical, but it all circles around the thought that to make our life an art form, we have to adopt self-discipline, just the same as an artist does. And so let's look at different areas that we can make art forms in our life. Let's look at human relationships. Because, we have the image from romantic movies and novels that two people are perfectly suited and they fall in love and they live happily ever after. That's not what happens. I remember, I won't say the name, but it's one of our great saints at Ananda, who's married, great soul, founding member. And he said to his wife, and luckily she was enough of a yogi that she could accept this. He said, I want you to understand that I see this marriage as a job. And I'm going to do the very best I can, but it's just a dharma. And luckily she could accept that. But what he was saying was, it's not based on feeling, it's not based on likes and dislikes, it's based on living in truth and acting properly. So the art of human relationships is disciplining our speech. When you just want to blurt something out, Swami said, before I say anything or do anything, I always ask Master, is this what you want? Is this what you want? And how much damage is done in relationships by that blurting out an unkind, critical remark, and you can't take it back. Once it's out, you can't reel it in and erase it like you can on a computer. No, it's there. And if the person who is the recipient of that, if they're wise enough, they can say, all right, I know you didn't really mean that. You didn't mean that action. But the art of relationships, it's so much more than personal feeling. Jyotish and I were fortunate. This year we celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary. And and by living with self-discipline, self-control, respect, it gets better and better. You just realize the souls grow closer and closer. And so to understand, it's not just about feeling, but it's about putting energy in the positive ways into our relationships? And then how do we make accomplishing our goals an art form? Because that we live in a society that's driven. Oh, we have to do this and we have to do that, and we've got to create this and so forth. But that's where Master gave us the whole principle of energy and magnetism. If we learn to work with energy, not just with tension and willpower, you can accomplish so much more. Because you're drawing, and this is another important part, by disciplining ourselves in a spiritual context, what happens? What energy flows through us? It's God's energy that flows through us. And so many times in our own life and in the life of the history of Ananda, things that seemed absolutely impossible to achieve, if we just stepped back, got into a flow of energy, then we drew the solutions. And so the art of accomplishment is a great, great thing to apply, a creative expression. Not how can I do it with tension and willpower, but how can I do it in a flow? How can I do it with a flow of energy? Dance represents that. Jyotish's art represents that beautiful flow of energy. And then how do we make our daily life an art form? This is wonderful because art, I remember a few years ago, there was a practice that we had at Ananda village at the high school there. Every year, the students would learn in preparation to going down to stay at an orphanage in Mexico, very poor, that students would learn Spanish. They ran a little thrift store where they earned money for their trip, and the students would go down with 2 suitcases, one of their own clothes and one of clothes for the orphans in this Mexican orphanage. And one year, the way this started, one of our teachers in the school, her mother had been an orphan in Mexico. And at that time, it was not such a challenge to cross the border. When she was too old for the monastery, for the orphanage, she came to America, married, had 12 children, and one of her children lived at Ananda. But this woman, Ophelia Sanchez was her name. She was a remarkable woman, really a saint. And so she lived in Sacramento, California, and she created kind of a training for Mexican immigrants to get jobs, to belong to a church and so forth. So we were visiting her one time, I remember, and she just had such enthusiasm for life. She was making tortillas by hand, and she said, "Okay, now you make them." I'd never made tortillas by hand. I said, "Ophelia, I don't." She said, "No, you can do it. So, and then she said, "Okay, you did it. Now you come to the orphanage with us." So I ended up going to the orphanage with them, but it was an amazing experience. There were 300 children in this building. There was 1 priest and 3 nuns, and they just took care of themselves. But it was so joyful. And there was this one little old Mexican lady who was the cook. And of course, the meals were rice and beans and tortillas. That's what we had. But so there were 3 of us as adults from Ananda Village who went along. And so we were helping in the kitchen, and we were trying to put things in a pretty ways, so it wasn't just rice in a big pot like that. And so one day, she was like watching us out of the corner of her eye. One day she came and she was holding this big pot of beans, and she had stuck a carrot right in the middle, look what I did. Good. But just whatever you're doing to find a way to make it be more beautiful. It doesn't matter how insignificant it is. Truly it doesn't. And we also, I love to cook, so I'm telling some stories about cooking, but to do it intuitively, not just by recipes and this and this and this. Every year at Ananda Village, we have Spiritual Renewal Week, and on the last day we have a big Indian banquet. And there are usually about 300 or 400 people that come. There's a man, an Indian man, who's a friend of ours from the area. He's not a cook, but he insists on preparing that meal every year for 400 people they cook. And the people who help him say he never measures anything. Like he'll take this much rice, this much curry powder, just handfuls, and it always works out perfectly. And then he told us Indian cooks don't measure. I never knew that. I read the Indian cookbooks and I go like that. But to be able to be in that and when he's done cooking after working, usually it's a 2-day process, he'll come out and everyone will applaud. He looks like just fresh as he hadn't done anything because he was in that intuitive flow. And so the art of living daily life is to find that ability to bring joy into whatever you do, and to feel that whatever you do, however humble, is serving God. I remember many years ago, Swami asked Asha and me if we would come over once a week to clean his house. And he would go away that day. He was always writing, but one day a week he'd take a day off. He'd go into town by himself at that time. And then Asha and I would clean his house. So one day we went in, he never told us what to do, but I went into the bathroom and I looked at the shower stall and it was just thick with mildew. I thought, oh, this is not good. And so I started scrubbing and I thought, well, I'll do other things. Hours went by and I was still in there scrubbing. And finally, I spent the whole day in that shower stall, but it was clean at the end of the day. But I felt such joy because I was doing it just out of the love of my heart. How great is it an art to scrub mildew off a shower stall? If you think it is, it is. If you think it's menial work, then it is. But if you give it your heart. But then as I was leaving, I thought, I bet Swami won't even notice, I bet he, and I was a little bit, it was ego coming in there. But I wanted some pats on the back. And I thought he probably won't have noticed. So then Asha and I were leaving, and we were at the door. And we were about to leave, and he said, oh, I hope someone cleaned the shower stall. It really needed to be done. And I was happy, but then as the years went by, I thought, if I hadn't had an egoic attachment, he wouldn't have said that. If I had just been totally inside free, he would have just intuitively thanked me. So the art of living, just as Jyotish was saying about painting, it's looking at the people in your life. It's looking at what you want to accomplish. It's looking at the most menial tasks at hand and doing them with joy and love and in ways that in new ways. When we have a son that Jyotish mentioned, when he was little, as some of you who are parents know, it involves a lot of laundry. And so I would spend a lot of time folding laundry, and I didn't like it. This is boring, folding all these clothes. But then I thought, it's part of my life. Why waste time? Be happy. And so I started folding. Maybe I'll fold it this way. No, maybe I'll do, oh, look, I can do two together. Oh, and it became fun. And folding laundry became one of the favorite things I did. And I'll just share something personal that I wasn't going to share. About a year ago, I was folding laundry. And I was folding Jyotish's T-shirts. And this poem came to me into my mind. Let's see if I can remember it. I was folding your T-shirts the other day. It was certainly not the first time. It was not for the first. But as I did it, I realized one day it will be the last time. But whether the first or the last, my dear friend, it has been the joy of my life. And so it's all passing. It's all passing. The meals we cook, who knows? The laundry we fold, who knows how long we will do it? But to live in the moment where you're bringing joy to it and you're saying, I'm doing this because you've given it to me to do. And then we come to the final art, and that's the art and science of yoga. And Swamiji, his classic book, The Art and Science of Raja Yoga, what did he do? He blended art and science. Why is yoga a science? Because it's based on experiment. It's based on what really works. Why is it an art? Because it's like all of life. It's not enough to know the technique. You have to make it your own. And that's the secret of the art of living. Be self-disciplined, get training, learn what you need to do in life, but then make it your own and bring your own joy and your own love into everything you do. And if you can do that, then the art of living becomes the art of freedom. And the secret of everything Swamiji did, the writing, the music, the photography, the communities, everything. Why? Because he always said, God is the doer. And so the secret, the true secret of the art of living is to say, this is God's life. These are God's t-shirts. This is God's big pot of beans. And God is just flowing through me. He is the doer. And if we can live our lives that way, where do we end up? One with God. God bless you.